Today's episode is brought to you by In My Bag Apparel and Customs. In My Bag is a brand that collaborates with talented artists from across the country to bring some unique and exclusive concepts to life at a reasonable price. For $15 off your first purchase, visit whatnot.com/invite/in_my_bag 2023. That's whatnot.com/invite/in_my_bag 2023 for $15 off your first purchase. And make sure to check them out on Instagram as well at in_my_bag 2023. Did you know Stephen Colbert's middle name is Tyrone? That's all it is for today. Let's get into it. All right. What's good, everybody? Welcome back to the Playbook Podcast. I'm PScott Kelly. Had to sneak one in before the actual postseason started. I got to work tomorrow. So, we have to try to get in where we fit in. So, postseason starts tomorrow. There's a lot to get to. I'm going to give you PScott's picks. I'm going to give you what I think is going to happen. I'm going to give you two parlays. One is just who I think is going to win straight up. The other, we're going to go against the spread because scared money don't make money. So, again, if you have anything you want to throw into the chat as well, please feel free to. Also, make sure to like, share, subscribe on the Facebook platform, YouTube, also the Playbook Podcast, and on Spotify, same thing. Trying to get this thing off the ground since we're just about 5 episodes into it, but you don't need to hear me promote anything any longer. Let's get into what I'm going to do first is just do who I think is going to win. Okay, we're not going to do my fun parlay of against the spread. We'll keep that one for the secondary run that we do. So this one's going to be pretty short. We'll run through just who I think is going to win these games straight up. So we're picking all 6 games. First, and they're not like in necessarily sequential order of when they play, but it is in I made these wagers, and this is what shows up on my sheet. So this is where we're at. We got the Chargers at the Texans. I think that we'll breeze through these. Chargers at Texans, I got the Chargers winning. Ravens at Steelers, Steelers at Ravens, I got the Ravens winning that one. Broncos at Bills, I have the Bills. Green Bay is at Philly, I've got Philly. Tampa is hosting Washington, I've got the Bucks winning that one. And the Vikings are at the Rams, I have the Rams winning that one. So I just want to get through all 6 of those real quick. So you kind of had my thought process on it. Now that parlay is if you were to wager $100, you'd win 500. If you did exactly as I did, picked all the winners that I had, $100 wins you 500. Now, secondary one that we're going to get into right now is against the spread, where a $100 bet would have wagered you. I'm trying to do the math in my head on this. It's over $1,000 though. So let's go ahead. We'll put it there for now. So getting into the first game on my docket is Chargers. And this is all based on when I did this. So there's a couple of these bets where injuries weren't quite put out into the universe yet. The biggest one was we didn't know about Jalen Hurts, even though with the line the way that it was being -4, because I did these on Wednesday. It's always a little dangerous when you do these wagers early because you don't know what the history or what the injury report is going to be. But depending on where the line is by about Wednesday, you have a pretty good idea of anybody who is questionable if they're going to start, because otherwise you get these huge line swings and then you start seeing these bets get way out of whack, right? So when Philly on Wednesday, they were still -4. They were 4-point favorites. And that's before I knew if Jalen Hurts was going to play. I felt pretty confident. So with the Eagles being 4-point favorites on Wednesday, I decided to go ahead and lock that in case once it was confirmed if Jalen was starting, if it was going to even go up even higher than that. But and the Ravens game was another one where I picked them before I knew that Zay Flowers was going to be out. Again, I did this on Wednesday, so I kind of have to bite the bullet on the choices that I made, but I still feel pretty confident. Let's get into the first game. It's on the docket for me is Chargers at Houston. And when I locked this in, it was Chargers -2.5. So they're 2.5 point favorites, even on the road. I don't trust at all the Houston offensive line. And what I'm worried about more than anything else is last year we saw a CJ Stroud where we saw I think what we saw was a team that we had zero expectations for in the Texans with a rookie head coach, rookie quarterback, and because they overachieved, we kind of put them in this echelon that they weren't ready for. And that doesn't mean they still can't win tomorrow. I need to be perfectly clear because they did make the playoffs and they did. I don't know. I'm not sold on CJ Stroud. It's mostly because we, the collective we, out in the interwebs community, put him as like a top 5 quarterback through 7 or 8 starts, which I think is just completely asinine. When I'm looking at this game of the offensive line for the Chargers is very good, and I think that they're going to be able to hold up against the pass rush of the Texans. And the Texans are obviously they're going to get pressure with Danielle Hunter. They're going to be able to create their own pressures, whether it's zone blitzes or whatever the case might be. But are we thinking that Houston is going to be able to do anything as far as being able to stop the Chargers pass rush, to be able to stop the Chargers like from actually creating their own havoc? Because at this point in time, I don't know if that's true. That offensive line has been really bad the entire season, basically. So if you're giving me the things for me, what it feels like it's a really dumb and antiquated way of putting things is that do I trust the coach? Do I trust the quarterback? And it seems like I'm just dumbing it down. But when it gets to this point in season, coaching really matters, quarterback matters. And and also running the ball translates, defense travels. Like there's certain things that I try not to give you a whole lot of the what you get from the run of the mill stuff from your ESPN shows. I try not to give you that. I want to give you something more entertaining than just those types of things. But the truth of the matter is, when we're really putting this all together, is quarterback, coach matter. Can you run the ball circumstantially? That's all I care about. When it comes to this, can you convert on 3rd and short? Can you run the ball when you need to? I'm tired of us doing this dumb thing of you have to run the set to pass because that is an antiquated way of looking at football. It is not how any of this is done anymore. But can you do it effectively when you need to? I know the Chargers can. I trust the offensive line. They have the better quarterback. They have the better coach. You're also not going into inclement weather. You're playing in a dome. I don't know how much we can really trust this Houston offense. Now, Nico's going to be awesome. I think. I just look in my heart of hearts. I got it at 2.5. It was the Chargers are minus 2.5. I don't trust Houston, man. I don't. I don't trust their offensive line. I don't trust CJ Stroud. I think we annoyed him too early. I've been talking for almost 10 straight minutes. Let me take a real sip real quick. Yeah, I just don't. I got the Chargers minus 2. Let me get to the chat real quick. Craig Byers says Philly's winning it all. Okay, so I'm not going to be. We'll get to that because I didn't lay out a bracket necessarily, right? I didn't go straight to my postseason picks for like an NCAA bracket where we just kind of put all this together and who I think is going to win it all. But going into the season, I had the Eagles going to the championship, right? I had them being in the Super Bowl. I just felt like last year was kind of an anomaly. That roster top to bottom is ridiculously talented. I think that the biggest thing was when they got Vic Fangio. To me, I feel like that was going to be the thing that was going to really turn things around. And defensively, they've been awesome. Obviously, we got the Jason Sehorn, resurrection and Cooper DeJean over there now. But I had them going to the Super Bowl in the before the season started, and I still feel relatively confident with that. Craig also says that I think the Chargers beat the Texans. That's what I think too. That's where I got right now. Like I said, I had the Chargers minus 2.5. Actually, you know what? Let me do something real quick because I want to make sure I get you guys the correct number on what you'd win based on what I'm giving you right now. No, I'm not gonna do that. I'm not gonna avoid the. I'm not gonna avoid the chat like that. But yeah. Anyways, that was really bad for radio for about 35 seconds. But I got the Charger -2.5. We'll go ahead and go on to the next game real quick. So I locked this game in. Actually, I'm actually kind of glad I did this. Again, this is on Wednesday, so the lines were a little bit more aggressive one way towards the other. I had Pittsburgh plus 10.5. So this is one of those things where I talked about I I wasn't sure about Jalen Hurts when the Eagles were -4. But this one makes me feel even better now because I locked this in before I knew that Zay Flowers was going to be out for the game. So at the time, Pittsburgh was plus 10.5. I took them anyways because this just feels like it's your typical Pittsburgh Baltimore game. I think that Baltimore is still exponentially better. Exponentially might be the wrong word. Offensively, they're exponentially better. Defensively, they've been so much better than they were at the beginning of the year. The one thing that Baltimore has always kind of struggled with this year is like the true number one, like legit. We throw the term number one wide receiver around way, way, way too often. Just because you are wide receiver one on the depth chart does not mean that you are an actual number one wide receiver. To me, like that is a legitimate. You're a top five dude in the league because T. Higgins is somebody who they say is a number one wide receiver, but a lot of that is because he has a top three quarterback and he also has arguably the best wide receiver as well as the true number one. Jamar is the true number one. If Jamar's not there and T. Higgins is again now he's your ex, I don't know, man. Like I don't think he's considered the same way, but because you've got such a ridiculous talent on one side, his numbers get to be awesome as well. So Pickens is one of those dudes where I don't consider him necessarily to be a true number one wide receiver. I think that he's very good. The problem, though, is also that he's had some really, really dog quarterbacks and a trash offensive line. So those things matter. If he's someplace else, would he look better and be a more blossoming wide receiver? Absolutely. But that isn't his circumstance. So when I locked this in with the Steelers plus 10.5, there's some bozo in one of these other group chats. Or not group chats, but in these other, social media groups, if you will, that said that he had, I think Zach Gold is his name. If anybody's watching, you can tag him. It's whatever. Saying that he has the Steelers by 21. And the reason why I feel really confident in the Steelers plus 10.5 is, bro, to think and with all kinds of ridiculousness of the Steelers winning by 21, they have to score 21 and then blank Baltimore. That's not happening. Plus 10.5, I think, is just one of those slugfest type games. That slugfest is even still kind of ridiculous because Baltimore is going to be able to put up points, but I feel like you're still going to get one of those backdoor touchdowns. The one thing that Pittsburgh's been able to do this season is Russell Wilson always seems to get off like one of these big deep shots, right? He always gets to get like one of those big chunk 30-yard plays to Pickens is usually the guy that he goes to. Also, he had a real rough week 18. I think he had -1 yards as far as the receiving stats are concerned. So I think you're going to get a better version of Pickens in their playoff appearance. But again, the struggle with Baltimore has been the true number one wide receiver with them that type of player cooking them, which Pickens isn't, mostly because of the quarterback position. But at 10.5, I feel pretty solid. Mostly because even if Pittsburgh gets in the realm where they get to 10, this could be a 20-10 game. Again, you might even see Baltimore get out to a somewhat early lead, start pulling guys. And I think that's actually what's going to happen. I could see Baltimore getting up like 14 early and just trying to get out of the building with as minimal injuries as possible. And you might see a couple backdoor late touchdowns from Pittsburgh going forward. But 10.5, I felt pretty good about it. And especially when you think now with Zay Flowers not being part of the equation, 10.5 feels even stronger now. So let's move on to our next one. So Buffalo is hosting the Broncos. When I locked this game in, it was Buffalo minus 8.5. I'm sure that it's still pretty relatively similar to that. Oh, before I move on, let's go back to the chat. Plus 10 feels pretty safe. Divisional game and no Flowers. Yeah, and I should have addressed that right from the get go when I saw that from Craig. I appreciate that. But yeah, that was kind of my thought process. With no Flowers, that feels pretty safe. I think Smitty is the best wide receiver in the league. I think Smitty the best wide receiver two. I'll have to go back and see what he's talking about that. But anyway, we're on to the Bills hosting Denver. So I was really reluctant on the minus 8.5. I really actually wanted to take Denver plus 8.5. But the more that I thought about this, the more I put it in the perspective of Josh Allen is, by most people's accounts, going to win MVP. Whenever there's an emotional thing attached to Buffalo, Josh Allen always seems to show up and show out, which can be great and also can be infuriating. Um, I really need people to pay attention to one specific thing, because this is the one thing I've always had about Josh Allen is he's going to give you 6-7 plays a game where you go, no one else can do that. And you're also going to have 6-7 plays a game where you go, nobody would do that. Just really pay attention to the, yo, what the are you doing plays? Because that is, it could come back to bite him. Like I said, I reluctantly took 8.5 with Buffalo because Patrick Surtain, what he's going to do is he's going to eliminate basically an entire third, if not half of the field. And from what I've been told, Josh Allen's been able to do so much more with less. And I'll kind of piggyback with that to the Baltimore thing for a moment is I think that what people need to understand is that Baltimore's offensive weapons, like they're not studs, right? Like we have Likely is a guy that we didn't even know until really last year, middle of last year, and had a couple of really bonkers games when Andrews was out. Andrews is old and broken. I don't believe in Rashad Bateman at all. I think that Zay Flowers is slightly overrated because he's a first-time Pro Bowler that the Pro Bowl wide receiver that the Ravens have never had before because he had 1,000-yard season and plays with arguably the best quarterback in the NFL. That's what we're doing and saying that they've got awesome weapons. All I did was name you one tight end who nobody knew until last year, a broken old tight end, a guy in Rashad Bateman who hasn't even sniffed 1,000 yards, and a guy in Zay Flowers who barely sniffed it this year. Yes, they've got Derrick Henry, and that's where the mismatch and that's where the problems happen is when you have the dominant running back that's paired with Lamar, sure. But to think that Lamar's got just these crazy weapons on offense is ridiculous because they don't. To go back over to Buffalo is I like their wide receiving core overall almost just as much as I do Baltimore, or just as much as I do Baltimore's, because Shakir's the guy who really makes all of this stuff move. And to me, if you're asking me who would I rather have, even Khalil Shakir or Zay Flowers, if I'm talking about in Buffalo, it's still Khalil. I'd rather have Shakir over Bateman or Flowers. This has just been something that they've been toying with. Buffalo has been for the last number of years, trying to see like what works and what fits. And it feels like they've kind of developed that perfect recipe of the big body target with Keon, even though he's a rookie. I think that people were expecting too much from him too soon. We're seeing him be like, we've seen glimpses of the reason why they took him where they took him. But Shakir is what kind of makes everything work from a wide receiver perspective. But if you're looking at two tight ends, even because this is going to be a matchup that we're probably going to see going forward with Baltimore and Buffalo at some point in time, is their two tight ends set with Kincaid and Knox. And you could argue that their duo is just as good as Baltimore's. And James Cook, I don't know if you guys pay attention to this, but I think he led the league in rushing touchdowns this year. It's just, I'm tired of people saying that Josh Allen did it with nothing. But when you're comparing it to what Lamar has, it's not the same, but it's very similar as far as like overall production is concerned. And I just feel like people are gassing up Lamar's weapons too much to try to overcompensate with something with Josh Allen. Anyway, to get more back on point as far as the game itself, I really struggled with, am I going to take Denver plus 8.5 or Buffalo minus 8.5? And Sertan's one of the reasons why I struggle with it so much, because he is going to be able to, whoever you want him to guard, he's basically going to be able to erase. But there is always just, again, it's the Josh Allen factor. I think he's just going to be able to will them to 21 points essentially by himself. Like once you get in the red zone, it's not going to matter if everyone's covered. Nick Bonito or Batonio, like, go ahead, man. Like, take him one-on-one if you want to, but that's a one-on-one battle you're not going to win very often. So with the juice that's going to be in Buffalo, the hype around them locking up the division again, and this really seems like they feel like it's their year, because I don't want to be associated with Cowboys fans in that regard, but it seems like the Bills fans are kind of creeping into that territory where it's our year. This has got to be the one. This might be your only chance. So in the first round, when it comes to Denver, mostly because I don't trust them offensively, this is the other reason why I struggled with it, is 8.5 is the Bills are designed to give up yards on the ground. What I don't, and the running game, I think, is going to be paramount to them at least keeping this close. But the Bills they're not going to stray away from what they've done. They run almost exclusively nickel on defense. They're going to give up yards, but it's going to be little plays and not big chunks. And I almost kind of talk about this with the Pittsburgh game earlier, is I feel like it's going to be a struggle for them to even get up to 17. So that's why they like Buffalo. To me, like if Buffalo wants to hang 30 on you, they'll hang 30 on you. I'm worried about that later on, about them not being able to not pan in 30, to keep their defense from being susceptible to the Ravens when they get to them almost inevitably. But as far as this game is concerned, if they really want to hang up 30 on Denver, I think they could. And Denver to me just doesn't have the offensive firepower to be able to match that if they need to. So reluctantly, but I did take the Bills minus 8.5. Moving on. So again, I was a little bit late to the party as far as the Jalen Hurts. I wasn't sure what was going on with his injury. But if there's one guy who in the NFL I'm most concerned about having great game to bad game, or who I'm going to need the most Jekyll and Hyde from, I mean, there's two of them really. It really, at least in the postseason, it is Sam Darnold, and it's also Jordan Love. And this is one of those things where, again, if Jalen Hurts is playing, it's not that I think that he's a great quarterback, but we've seen what this thing can be when they put in Saquon's hands and he's just picking guys apart with the open dude between Devontae Smith and AJ Brown. I feel like the formula is going to be more of, because Jalen's still the threat on the ground, right? I'm not even just talking about, all the 1 yard touchdowns that he vultures from Saquon, but he has the more electric on the ground element, which Green Bay is going to have to count for. I just feel like what we're going to see is a lot of heavy dose of Saquon and then a lot of easy reads by Jalen, and getting these guys in one-on-one positions, because you're going to have to stack the box, and it's hard to bring down AJ Brown by yourself, and it's hard to keep up with Devontae Smith. So the Eagles at home -4. I mean, to me, that defense is playing bonkers. Jordan Love is still a little banged up. I trust what I see up front on both sides of the ball with Philly more than I do with Green Bay, along with just Saquon is just a different animal. I think that him being in the postseason finally, you're going to see him pop off for like 150, maybe even 200 on Green Bay. And even then, I'm getting a little ahead of myself, because if he starts just gashing them early, they're going to have to make an adjustment. And then it's just going to be somebody else, right? It's going to be somebody else. So the Eagles -4, that's where I'm going to move on to the next one. We got Commanders at Tampa, which I think is actually going to be probably the best game of I don't want to be hyperbolic. I don't want to be that guy. But we have the Commanders and Bucks. The Commanders played the Bucks week 1 and got blasted, but it was also Jaden Daniels' first game. So I don't we've seen how good that Commanders offense is when he's playing. It's ridiculously good. And they're doing it with a lot of skill guys that you wouldn't. We like Terry McLaurin enough, but we don't really consider anybody else in their offense to be world beaters, right? There we don't put them in the conversation of guys in the skill position that we would want them on our team. So with all that being said, though, I think that Washington still loses. But this is the only reason why I took this is because of the hook. So when I locked this in, it was Commanders plus 3.5 on the road. This might be the one that bites me because Baker's been playing really well as well. But I just think when you got Jane Daniels, they haven't used him as much on the ground as they did early. This might be the time where they kind of unleash his legs and let him be like the athlete that we know that he is. So I think they keep it close. Maybe they get that again, that backdoor touchdown. When it comes to betting, when you give me that 3.5, or anytime you give me a half around that 6 or 7 free, wherever it is, like when it comes to field goals and touchdowns, and that's the spread on it, that half means a lot. So the Commanders plus 3.5, I still think they probably lose this game, probably by 3. It's probably 27-24, somewhere in that ballpark. But I've got the Commanders plus 3.5 at Tampa Bay, which brings us to our last game of the wild card round. Rams, well, I guess the Vikings at Rams, but it's not really at the Rams. And this is one of those ones where I don't know how much you can put into the stock of, the home field feel good story. Because it's not being played in California. That is something where SoFi already is one of those stadiums that you can already tell when people go to these games, it's not like all Chargers fans. It's when you go to other Charger or Rams fans. When you go to other stadiums, it is we are here. There's a couple sprinkled in, but like this is our turf. So splitting a stadium, one, doesn't help. Two, it's LA. There's just other things to do. And there's so many people who live in California and LA that you're just going to have more of a melting pot of fans that have moved there from other places. Now it's in Arizona though, and I don't know what the vibe is going to be because like you clearly aren't getting home field advantage, and I think it'd be a difficult thing to sell that you have home field advantage anyways, even if it was at SoFi. But we like to play into the narrative of when like disaster strikes, and I don't want to make this too sad or too much football on both sides of this one because like there's a lot going on in the LA area, and I probably should have led the show with this on just hoping that everybody that down there is safe. I know that there's not, and it's just a complete. I don't even know the words to describe it really, but from the football aspect, maybe they have more to play for. And I guess I'll get back to instead of just the feels and emotions of it, just the Rams have had this kind of up and down year offensively. They haven't looked good over the past number of weeks. They looked great against Buffalo, which is one reason why I don't entirely trust their defense. But they also played the Rams, I believe, and they I think they beat the Vikings, excuse me. I think they beat the Vikings earlier this year as well. So I don't think that they're necessarily really all that worried about the Vikings offense. Mostly because of that pass rush. That pass rush is young and they're fast, and they've really turned it on towards the end of the year. Whereas it was weird because they weren't really gelling initially. Puka was out, Cooper Kupp missed some time, and then towards the end of the season, we saw the defense really kind of pick it up, the pass rush most specifically, and all year long we've had this. I mean, not me. Any Vikings fan who's followed this page knows that I don't trust Sam Darnold at all. They think that he's all of a sudden resurrected. And yes, he's had a really great year, but we saw him go to Sam Darnold to same old Darnold last week against Detroit. So What I'm worried about is young, hungry pass rush getting after a dude who finally has some success with Sam Darnold, as opposed to the guy who, not only that, Stafford has this connection with Nakua and Cup that's pretty remarkable. Not to say that Darnold doesn't have that with, again, one of these true X wide receivers when it comes to Justin Jefferson, and they have Jordan Addison too. I get all that. But the run game, both have good running backs, right? Aaron Jones and Kyron Williams. I think that we understand that both running backs are really solid options. But what I'm worried about with Minnesota has been what I'm worried about with Minnesota all year is, can you trust Sam Darnold to once again not see ghosts? And he couldn't do it last week against Detroit. And that defense isn't even any good, right? They got like 900 infinity billion guys on IR. And that I think can be worrisome. Now, I know a lot of Vikings fans are going to say, well, what if he has a bounce back game? He could easily have a bounce back game. Yes, he could. Most of the season, he's been awesome, especially the connection with him and Jefferson. I get it. There just hasn't been enough proof. This is his first time in the playoffs too. So there's a couple of different ways you can go at this from a Vikings fan's perspective as well, is that it's his first time playing in the playoffs. What does he have to lose? Like you might think that he'll just come out guns blazing, and he's never been in this environment before, so why should he be nervous? While on the other side, it's Stafford's been here before, has won a Super Bowl, knows what this environment's like, and maybe he comes in calm. And Sam, because Sam has even said out loud in person, that's what the whole like seeing ghost things. We've seen you say this in person. So, and again, last week is another affirmation of, bro, when things are on the line, you get tight. When everything isn't perfect, and I know statistically, because of what he's done this year, it sounds like there's a lot of Sam Darnold hatred. And I wouldn't say that you're completely wrong in that assessment of me, the way that I look at him. But dude, I've seen this movie so many times before and with him. And this to me just feels like it's an extension of week one from what should be the opener next week or next year. With Sam Darnold, it always is towards the end of the season, he starts to figure it out, right? Now, this season's obviously been different because he started off pretty hot. He's had a couple of goofball games, but teams start to think that they can trust Sam Darnold based on the end of a season, the last 3 or 4 or 5 weeks, when in previous stops, most specifically New York, there's nothing to play for him. So he's just slinging the ball, and his touchdown interception ratio looks good. And there's a winning record in the last 5 weeks. They always taught themselves into Sam Darnold could figure it out. This year's a little bit different. He was good for most of the year, bad the last week. Is this just, hey, you're about to get God. There's enough film on you now. There's enough film on, and he's going to do this. Before we hang it up, I am not saying that Josh Allen and Sam Darnold are the same person, and I need everyone to know that. But there is always, because I mentioned this with Josh Allen earlier, pay attention to what happens in that game against Denver. There's going to be a few plays. There's going to be a few moments where he's going to make you question his football IQ because there's no reason for him to make certain plays. But sometimes he gets bailed out because it's lucky bounce. Sometimes he gets bailed out because he throws the ball 7,000 miles per hour. There's always something, and he kind of lucks out. Sam Darnold has some of those same qualities. He just wasn't as lucky until he got to Minnesota because the team around him is so much better. I would just be cautious if you're a Vikings fan. Watch out for the same thing I kind of alluded to with Josh Allen. Watch out for the 5, 6, 7 plays in their game against LA that he throws it to somebody that he shouldn't to. He's not paying attention. He doesn't see the linebacker drop. There's going to be something where he's going to make a bonehead play, but it's not going to be one. There's going to be 5, 6, 7 of them. Just pay attention to it. And if those things result into turnovers, the Vikings are cooked. They're just cooked. Anyway, with that being said, we're gonna go ahead and hang it up for the day. Y'all been listening to the Playbook podcast. I don't even know, like the whole thing about this is I just wanted to get my picks out into the open so that people knew what they were on wax. This is probably only going to go on the podcast, but again, if you did stay all the way through, make sure to like, share, subscribe, smash the 5-star reviews. Look us up on Spotify, the Playbook podcast, smash the 5-star reviews there. Anyway, we're gonna hang it up for the night. It's 8 o'clock where I live, which means it's midnight on the East Coast. I just want to put this on wax so you guys knew exactly where I thought before the game started. And if I'm right, I told you so. And if I'm wrong, figure it out next time. You guys know the drill. Stay up, stay blessed. We'll catch you guys on the next one.